Within the world of marriage or significant relationships, I'm sure that you can understand there are libraries of information, data, research about couples, about what causes divorce, about what causes infidelity, and the list goes on and on. Today I want to talk to you about a concept called contempt. Now, John Gottman, who is one of the leading researchers on marriage and who has written several books and is actually a trainer of therapists, says that the number one predictor of divorce is contempt within a relationship. Now, contempt is something that you can't always maybe lay out a perfect definition, but you know what it feels like when you experience it. John Gottman goes on to say, it's almost impossible. He, in fact, says it's impossible. And I disagree with that, but he says it's impossible for a couple to work on marital issues when one partner is convinced that the other partner is disgusted with them. Contempt is when you feel like you basically are repulsed by your partner or spouse. I have felt that from Samantha. I've actually called Samantha out on that at different times in our relationship. Not even infidelity related, but there's been times in the past where we've had a rough patch just about life and marriage. And I've had to say to her, I feel this extreme form of contempt for you. In fact, I feel that you're repulsed by me. What's going on? Now, when you're dealing with infidelity, I'll tell you that early on after disclosure, it's almost normal for you as an unfaithful to feel contempt from your betrayed spouse. Hence my disagreement with the fact that it is impossible to repair a relationship if one partner feels disgusted or repulsed by another. I don't agree with that because when you're dealing with the acid of infidelity, there's going to be contempt early on. Contempt is, in fact, I truly believe, the number one predictor of divorce, but that doesn't mean that contempt cannot be healed, cannot be addressed, cannot be diffused. Contempt can also be manifested through eye rolling, through sarcasm, cynicism, shaming, name calling, things like that. Now, at the end of the day, for those of us walking through the healing of infidelity or addiction, all of those things were probably pretty normal early on. There's going to be contempt. It's when we get stuck in contempt that the statistical probability of our relationship being restored starts to really lessen very significantly. Today I want to tell you that another contributing factor to contempt is actually disconnection. And many of us, when we're trying to heal, start to experience disconnection. We also experience this unresolved resentment and bitterness and anger, and that constantly leads us down the road of contempt. And then we wake up one day and there's just this anger. There's just this rage that says, I don't even want to work on the marriage. I don't even want to heal the relationship. I don't want to do any of this because I'm so angry, I'm so hurt, and I feel such disgust and contempt for my partner or spouse. Now, what do you do? The oversimplification that so many people will say is you just need to forgive. If you'll just forgive him or her, then the contempt will immediately diffuse and you'll go on your merry way and your relationship will be saved. That's a load of crap. I'm sorry. It's just not that easy. It's just not that simple. And I'm sure many of you have been told that and it failed miserably, or it kind of gave you this little initial, okay, yeah, we're doing great, only to have it rear its ugly head in 6 to 12 to 24 months. And you kind of wake up and go, wait a minute, that didn't work. In fact, now I'm even more angrier. Now I've re-tapped into the rage that I felt 12 months ago. And now I'm even more discouraged and more hopeless and more angry. So today I'm just going to give you a few pointers, but I'm going to give you different pointers than I've given maybe in the past, because many of you know about some things I constantly say, yes, forgiveness is key, and yes, expert help, all of that. But today I want to give you a few kind of new things to consider. Number one of the most life-giving things that you can do is accept where you're at. Rick says this a lot. I used to hate it, now I tolerate it. Until you can accept where you're at, you'll never get to where you so desperately want to be. Part of it is just accepting, man, things look and appear hopeless. things are terrible. I really kind of feel a hatred towards my spouse or partner, or I'm incredibly angry and I'm just going to accept that I'm this way right now. I'm not going to shame myself. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay. I'm not going to live in denial. I'm just going to accept the status of our situation. Because when you can look at things with clarity, it gives you a better sense of, okay, I've finally accepted how things are. That doesn't mean that they have to stay that way. Number 2 is understanding grief work. You probably have become somewhat familiar with the 5 stages of grief. Some people call them the 7 stages of grief, and you can Google those things and read them. But grief work is accepting your grief and then really working through that grief. Being able to understand that this is going to require you as a betrayed spouse to grieve your way through it. As an unfaithful, you're going to have to grieve your way through it as well. You'll never get to the 3rd step, if you will, which is forgiveness, until you've grieved. See, many times we try and rush right to forgiveness, but we've never really worked through the sorrow, the grief that we have experienced because of our partner's infidelity. It is kind of like death. I mean, you've suffered maybe the death of the relationship you thought you had. You've suffered the death of maybe the identity that you believed your spouse carried, only to see that that identity is actually a farce and not real. You may be experiencing the death of even just the life that you had that is now changed. It doesn't mean it can't be healed. It doesn't mean that you can't experience life again one day. But it is in many ways like a death, and that's okay. You'll never be able, I really believe, to truly forgive until you can grieve, and working through that grief work helps you accept where you're at to then move towards being able to forgive your spouse for whatever wrongs that they have committed, both unfaithful as well as betrayed. Next, you're going to need what I would call an expert intervention. That may look like taking one of our online courses. That may mean coming to our EMS weekend. That may mean finding someone who is a true expert in infidelity as a professional. But this whole you said, they said, this whole trying to do it on our own, this whole duct tape Jimmy rig, we just saw a general counselor, or we just saw someone like a pastor, rabbi, priest, what have you, that wasn't an expert, is not going to work for you guys that are experiencing extreme contempt, or even just a pretty palatable contempt. You need an expert intervention. You're going to have to decide, look, these little kind of surface things aren't going to work. We're beyond that. Because if you can get this expert intervention, then you can take step number 5, which is to actually turn towards each other rather than constantly turning away from each other, which only produces disconnection and contempt and division. And before you know it, you're so far away from each other, you can't even see a way back. You may be filled with such emotion and animosity, you don't even want to turn towards your partner. It's understandable. But as you work through these steps, I fully believe, from personal experience, you can start to turn towards each other. I think one of the most important variables in this whole equation is connection. Now, sometimes, my little caveat for you is sometimes you can appear like you're a million miles away, but just a little bit of connection goes a long way. And you kind of feel like, wow, he or she actually heard me. He or she actually kind of listened. I feel connected with them. It's amazing how much ground you can gain when you truly connect with them at a deeper, intimate level. If you're struggling with contempt today, please understand it's normal when you're dealing with infidelity, but you can't stay there. I hope that you can use these steps to be able to move through the contempt. Have I, as an unfaithful, felt extreme contempt for Samantha? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Has Samantha felt contempt for me for wrecking her life? Absolutely. But you can heal. You can move through it. I just personally will tell you, you can absolutely move through the contempt if both of you will get on board with these steps. Man, I wish you all the best. I know it can be so discouraging. Contempt is so corrosive. It's like acid. But there is a way through. If nobody tells you this today, please hear me. There is a way through the contempt. There is a way for you to diffuse the contempt inside of you, even if the relationship doesn't survive. Because you're going to have to deal with that contempt if you're going to be healed and whole one day on your own.